there are very compelling and sophisticated evolutionary explanations for the existence of religion. You want to hear them?
Please.
So there are two competing schools of thought. So an adaptation in evolutionary theory is something that evolves because it confers either survival or reproductive advantage to me. So my gustatory preferences preferring fatty foods is an adaptation that works through survival mechanism, right? My having a large peacock tail, if I'm a peacock, is something that evolves because it confers a mating advantage compared to the other male suitors who have a smaller peacock tail. Okay, so that's an adaptation. So now so the argument would be, well, what adaptive value does being religious confer? And so David Sloan Wilson, who's an evolutionary biologist, who I've he's invited me several times to his university. He's come on my show. We apparently are no longer friends because I said some really mean things about Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama, and he then wrote, "I hope that my good friend and wonderful evolutionary psychologist Gad Saad finds his humanity," because I became non-human because I dared criticize some of his favorite politicians. That's what a parasitized mind looks like. In any case, I do respect his scientific work. So he's a group selectionist, which basically means that he argues that some traits could evolve at the group level rather than at what Dawkins would say at the gene level. And so what he argued is that groups that are religious out-survive groups that are not religious through the mechanisms of greater cooperation, communality, cohesion. So there are very earthly biological reasons for why religiosity would confer greater survival rates to the religious than the non-religious. So that's explanation one.
Yes.
I feel like there's going to be a repeat invitation of God Sat on the show.
Oh, brother. Number 3 is already guaranteed.
Now, here's the second one. This is a term that many of your viewers would not have heard, but it's a very important term in evolutionary theory. It's called an exaptation. An exaptation is a trait that is a byproduct of evolution. It didn't evolve to be of that form because it confers some adaptive value. If you like, it's a path-dependent accidental byproduct. So, for example, the color of our skeletal system does not confer us any adaptive advantage. It's just an engineering path-dependent outcome. Okay? Now, the exaptation argument for religion is that religion piggybacks as a byproduct on neuronal systems that evolved for other purposes. So, example, human beings have evolved the coalitional psychology mindset. There is blue team, there's red team. There is us who are in the group of 150, and there's the rest of the world who are all assholes. So we very easily view the world as us versus them. It's an innate part of the human mind's architecture. Well, what does religion do? Certainly the Abrahamic religions, they piggyback on that mechanism. There are the Jews and there are the Gentiles. There are the believers in Islam and the kuffar, the non-believer, which is a derogatory term. There are the ones who are going to be accepted into the grace of Jesus Christ, and the rest of us assholes who are going to burn in eternal damnation. So each of those religions puts the marker of blue team, red team in a different way, but they all do the blue team, red team. So in that view, religion is, if you like, kind of a parasitic thing that is piggybacking on neuronal systems that exist for other purposes. So if you want the classic people for each of these two camps, David Sloan Wilson would be the adaptation guy. Pascal Boyer would be the exaptation guy. And both have been on my show. So for your viewers who want to look at both of these guys, great work.
And that's really interesting. So I grow increasingly concerned. In fact, this is how I got pulled sort of to the far, far edges of the culture war, but I started looking around and realizing, whoa, we're getting very divided, and that division does not go away by itself. And I can feel things sort of ratcheting up. And that led me to, okay, what is it that's allowing a fragmentation that we didn't have before? Now, part of it is what I'll call algorithmically induced psychosis. So you're just, the algorithms understand what you like and what enrages you, but above all, what causes you to interact. And so that already creates, you don't even have to be geographically connected and you can find your red and blue teams. But maybe more importantly is the breakdown of religion as one sort of grand unifying narrative that tended to play out geographically.
Right.
So you would get a religion, it would become the dominant religion of the area. And I mean, you see, as old as time, it really ends up becoming, as we start getting into larger and larger groups, to your point about in-group, out-group, it becomes one religion versus another. And when, I mean, for God knows how, thousands of years, that was how things divided. It was, you were more divided by religion than you were geography.
Yes.
So you could, from Yuval Noah Harari's perspective, this was a thing that allowed us to come together in gigantic groups.
Yes.
And still cooperate flexibly in a way that, say, ants can't. They can cooperate in huge numbers, but not flexibly. But religion gave us a thing, I've never met you, but we believe in the same God. We have the same in-group, out-group.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and so you put together social media, algorithms, and the death of that grand unifier, and now you've got a problem. And I think that's what Jordan is trying to get people to see. That, and I think he really believes that there's a lot of wisdom contained in the maps of meaning level
Yes.
breakdown of the stories themselves. And I know you guys talked in your most recent interview about, like, he threw out one example of the name Eve means like one you contend with, something like that.
Right.
So you get a very deep, if you knew that word to mean that, you would suddenly get like a wink, wink, nod,
Yes.
nod about what men and women are to each other. They are the thing you want to contend with.
Look, yesterday, the gentleman who was praying for me as I was leaving the car, I told him that, I was very open to the fact that religion contains certain incredible wisdoms that have been tested throughout time, and therefore I can be sympathetic to many of its teachings, which of course made him very happy. Now, what I didn't tell him, the next part, is that also in, I don't know if it's in Deuteronomy, or so someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but take your insolent children to the gates of the city and stone them to death. Suddenly that becomes, it's metaphorical, it's allegorical. So you can't pick and choose the buffet of what. So items 1, 3, 7, and 8 are beautiful morality. The other ones that are completely insane and immoral, will forget him. God was joking. So that's why I don't like the idea of fixating my entire moral compass on a particular code. I'd like to think that we've evolved a moral compass that would allow most of us, unless we're psychopaths and cheats and murderers, to be able to understand what is good or bad without necessarily having, as Christopher Hitchens said, a celestial dictator to whom I am, I'm always trying to please and placate.
So that comes back to then, how do we collectively kneel for the same reason, right? So if we've got, we used to be able to rely on religion, and I get why that was not ideal.
Yeah.
But it seems like, to your point about neuronal structures, we need something.
Yeah.
Because when we don't have it, we hyper fragment.
Deontological principles that serve as organizing frameworks for understanding the world.
Do you think it will work though? When you say that, you sound so smart that I'm already terrified that, like, no, for real. I hate that this
even
is true.
as I said it, I wasn't sure that could work. But I'd like to think, as a smiling optimist, that there is a way out of the impasse that doesn't necessarily require religion. The beauty of truth, the beauty of knowledge, the beauty of kindness.
How do you memify it though? How do you make it contagious, but in a positive way?
That might be above my pay grade. If I answer that one, I win the Nobel Prize.
That's fair, and I will pay for your flight because, man. So is this becoming one of the most important questions? I think it is. Yeah. Like, what is going to be that replacement? So Jordan, who I admire greatly, has reverted back basically to religion.
Yeah.
And we've all gotten to watch him do it in real time.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that you can demarcate his personal life with the illness. Like that,
Yeah.
I think is very meaningful. But we need something. There has to be something. People need to be asking and answering this question. I really don't have the answer. I think you're probably closer than I am, but we need something.
Well, build a family, do meaningful things. So one of the things I talk about in the book, I say that there are two paths to immortality that do not require belief in the afterlife. Number one, I literally become immortal by having children. They share half my genes. They are vehicles of my immortality. Now that sounds kind of vulgar and materialist, right? That I'm viewing my children, but they are. That's why I would jump in front of a bus and get killed to save them, right? I mean, that's the whole.
I come from an evolutionary lens, so that does not sound weird to me at all.
Well, exactly. The second way by which I can become immortal is through mimetic immortality, to use the original term of Dawkins, is by leaving things off that other people will consume. It could be the gorgeous bridge that I created. There is a guy who built the Golden Gate Bridge, and his legacy is secured. There is a guy who's created this content that hopefully will be watched in thousands of years from now. So there are ways by which I could leave my signature forevermore without couching it in some eternal narrative. So now, I would love, I joked yesterday, I can't remember in what context, someone asked me something and I said, oh, well, I plan on never dying. So I understand the incredible existential angst that we all feel that the party is really going to finish soon. We really are on a death penalty situation. We're all on death penalty. So I'd like to believe that the party is going to go on in some other realm, in some other wormhole. But even if I disassociate myself from this very hopeful narrative, I can be immortal. My children are my ticket. My books, this conversation is my pathway to immortality. That's why I say, do meaningful things in life, right? I argue that anything that allows you to instantiate your creative impulse is well on your way for you to having purpose and meaning. Whether I am a chef or a stand-up comic or an author and professor or a podcaster, each of these pursuits share one thing in common. They create something that wasn't there before I came along and created it. That makes me immortal. So there are ways by which I can seek eternal life without believing in a celestial dictator.
Now we just have to find a way to seek that eternal connection that makes us draw people in closer, not push them farther away.
If you like that clip, check out another powerful clip right here, and I'll see you there.